Divorce happens. In fact, it happens to almost 50% of first marriages. So let's talk about it. Welcome to Divorce Happens, a podcast to educate, inspire, support, and yes, make you laugh through divorce and beyond so that you can start fresh on the next phase of your journey. Remember, divorce happens, and then we start fresh.
You get divorced. You get divorced.
Getting divorced?
I'm getting a divorce.
You're getting a divorce.
Because she's getting a divorce.
So what if I get divorced?
Hello and welcome back to Divorce Happens, the podcast where we support you before, during, and after divorce with education, inspiration, a little bit of laughter, and just a lot of love and support. We're here today with Renee, and we're going to talk about a very important topic. Renee, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure can. Thanks, Olivia. So I'm Renee Coleman. I am a residential mortgage lender. I am also a CDLP, which is a certified divorce lending professional. So this is what I do. I work in the divorce world every single day in my business.
Amazing. This is a topic that I've been talking to a lot of other divorced women about, especially because, there's so much about divorce people think they know. And this is something that just doesn't get talked enough about, which is the mortgage aspect of divorce. So I know from my personal experience, when I went through a divorce, I owned, I had a mortgage with my ex-husband, and I had to then refinance the house under my name. And it was a hard process because you're really buying the house again, right, from yourself, kind of. So I don't even know where to get started. There's so many questions. What does it look like? Let's start for the people that are considering divorce, okay? And they have a mortgage with their spouse. What do they need to start thinking about when it comes to that mortgage if they're going to be asking for a divorce shortly?
Yeah. So you want to know first, are you on the mortgage? Are you on the title of the home? Because a lot of people don't know that. Mortgages most know, but sometimes they don't. And if you ask them about the title of the home, sometimes they don't know that for sure either.
Yeah.
So the mortgage, it tells you who's responsible for paying. The title tells you who has ownership in the house. So you can be on one and not the other, and vice versa. It's funny. Most people kind of forget, once it's done, you don't really think about it. So as you're thinking about a potential divorce, let's find out if you're on.
Yeah, and that's
a mortgage.
Interesting question, Renee, because we're seeing a huge uptick in gray divorces, right? And so you may have bought your house 50 years ago, right? And so you may not know who's on what. And I think that's a really good point. Like, maybe you're on the mortgage, which women may not have been on mortgages in the same way 50 years ago, right?
Sure.
Or the title. So, okay. So, and how do you find that out, Renee? Like what your name is on?
So you can pull your credit. You can do it yourself. You can get a free credit report, myfreecreditreport.com, once a year. You can get it through Credit Karma. That's free. You can get it through, I know my credit card, a couple of my credit card companies will send me a report every so often, that I could access. So that's going to tell you not only if you're on the mortgage, it won't tell you if you're on the title, but it'll tell you if you're on the mortgage. But it's also going to tell you what else your name is on. So that can be important because people forget, much more so with credit cards and things, cars. I don't remember, he's on one, I'm on the other, we're on one, both together. It varies. Or I'm an authorized user on a credit card. All those things are important to remember and to know. So pulling your credit is a great way just to see what's in my name. What am I responsible for? So even if it's a credit card in your name, but your spouse uses it, it's in your name. You're responsible for that. So that's kind of my step number one, pull your credit. Let's see what's on it. Let's see what you're responsible for.
Yeah.
We want to know. And then we can talk about, what does it look like? Do we need some help with the credit? Do we need to fix some things? Do we need to close some accounts? Don't do it without talking to a lender first, because it can actually hurt your credit score to close things. But there's a strategic way to do it. So pulling your credit is kind of that first step. What am I on? What am I responsible for? If I were to separate, what does
Yeah.
that look like? What would be in my name?
That's really, really great advice. And I also just want to validate like how nerve-wracking that can be, right? For
Oh,
some
yeah.
people,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
To pull that. So I love, we'll link to all those free places. I use Credit Karma myself. I think
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
I
been
do too.
fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so you get the information about your credit, you have all of your Victoria's Secret card, your Old Navy card, right? All these things are
Right.
show up. And then you're like, what's the next step? Talking to somebody like you?
Yeah, it's kind of there's a bunch of people, like, you should have a team,
Yeah.
right? So your lender is one of them,
Yeah.
and a crucial one. Of course, your attorney or your mediator, but also your financial advisor, your CPA, or accountant, and even a coach, a life
Mm-hmm.
coach, divorce coach.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of them. Um, so you want to make sure that they're all part of the team. Having your whole team is super
Yep.
important. So we want to make sure that you're kind of talking to all of us at the same time. So I can pull your credit. We take an application
Yep.
right from the beginning, because part of what we need to know, what are our options with the house, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, credit will come into play for sure
Yeah.
first. But we also need to determine the value of the house. So as you start the negotiation, if you decide a divorce is the way you want to go, the first thing you're going to do is talk about the division of assets.
Yeah.
And so the house is one of those assets, right? I mean, in most places in the country right now, we've got a lot of equity. And so we want to make sure that we're calculating that equity correctly, so that when it does come time to divide those assets, right? So your assets could be everything from bank accounts to retirement accounts, equity in the house, vehicles. I mean, there's thousands
Yeah.
of pieces to that, but the house is probably one of the bigger ones. So knowing, what's the value of the house, and there's a couple of ways to determine that. So talking to your realtor is probably going to be the next step. We don't know. You might have an idea, if I
Yeah.
want to keep the house or I don't want to keep the house, but having the realtor come in to give you a value of the house, or an appraiser, that's kind of your next step. Because then when you're talking to your financial advisor and you're talking to your divorce attorney or mediator, you can at least have an idea of what all of the assets are. And then as you kind of start talking about dividing those assets, we know what the equity in the house is. So a lot of people don't understand what equity means and what that is. So in your home, you've got the value of your home,
Right.
and typically you have a mortgage. And so it's the value minus what you
Yes.
owe, and
Right.
that's the equity. That's
Yep.
what's going to be split, right? And so, again, just knowing up front what that is super helpful, to be
Yeah.
able to calculate. So that's kind of the next step, is sort of figuring out what the house is worth, and who do I need to talk to next.
Okay, I have so many questions for you. So okay, let's go back to the beginning.
Mhm.
You are a woman and you're thinking about getting divorced. Um, if you pull your credit, will your soon-to-be ex-husband find out?
No.
Okay,
No, you pull
that's
your own credit, and you are the only one that knows that.
okay. So number one, that's wonderful to know that.
Mhm,
So I appreciate that answer.
mhm,
And I think people don't realize how important it is to have a lender. You need to have a lender, right? If you own a house
mhm.
together, you absolutely need to have a lender on your team. Is it do people talk to lenders privately before they consider asking for divorce?
Oh, yeah, all the
Okay.
time,
Okay.
all the time. Because they wanna know what their options are. They wanna
Right.
know, can I keep the house? If we sell the house, where am I gonna go? Where am I gonna
Yeah.
live? Can I buy another house, right? So, I know for me personally, I too went through this process. It was 20 years ago. I wasn't a lender then, but I remember it was like, I don't know. What can I do?
Yeah.
What are my options here?
Yeah.
Am I gonna be homeless? Are my kids gonna be homeless? Like, where
Right.
am I gonna live?
Right.
So talking to your lender early, 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 that's like my number
Okay.
one thing. Talk to a lender early. And especially like myself, I mentioned I'm a CDLP. This is
Yep.
what I do. I
Yep.
work in divorce every single day. So I might talk with somebody and then 2 years later they come back
Yeah.
and say, "Okay, we're done this process and I'm keeping the house and now I need to refinance." Like, I will work with them through that entire 2 years because we don't know day 1 what the numbers, are going to end up at. But we wanna know what today, day 1 looks like so
Yeah.
that, like I said, knowing what your credit looks like, knowing what your income looks like, so we can prepare. And then as you're progressing through the process, if there's kids involved, we know likely there may be some child support and we may not know the numbers up
Right.
front, or there may be, alimony involved.
Yeah.
Um, and then again, as you progress further, we start talking about numbers for dividing the assets. And
Right.
maybe there's going to be a buyout to the spouse. And maybe we know roughly what the numbers are. Well, the earlier you talk to me,
Yeah.
the earlier we're going to know what you qualify for. Right.
Yeah.
So what we don't want to happen is you complete the divorce process, you sign. Once you sign on that dotted line, that's it. If your divorce agreement says, great, I get to keep the house and I have to buy my spouse out. And what we don't want to happen is you come to me after that and we put all your numbers together and you don't qualify.
Yeah.
So the sooner we know, the better. So as an example, if I put the numbers together and I say, it looks like we could take roughly $50,000 out of your equity and you'd still qualify for that. So if there's a buyout, we could likely go up to 50,000 and you come back, from your attorney and say, well, they're talking about 100,000. Well, that's okay. You can go back to your attorney and tell your attorney, I qualify for 50. So either we have to renegotiate or we have to find the other 50 somewhere else. Maybe it's in retirement accounts or other assets, so it's all part of the negotiation.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I talked to my lender, and I owned my own business at the time, and I was not making a ton of money, but I was making enough. And he called me and said, they will approve you, basically transferring the mortgage over, rebuying the house. It was the happiest moment of my life, right? And I had no idea, and I loved my lender was the one that got me through, most of my divorce. And so I just really want people to understand you need to have a lender that you trust and that you like working with, because that's going to be the person that really moves this process along.
Yeah.
And the other big thing I want to talk about, and I've been hearing this from other divorced, it's kind of in the divorce circles right now, is a lot of women, right, who, maybe will leave um, a higher paying job, right, to become a stay-at-home mom or work from home, right?
Yep.
And then a couple of years down the line, they want a divorce. They're maybe not making as much money as they used to. They're freelance, which is very hard, right?
Mhm.
Or own their own business.
Yep.
And I think that if anybody's listening to this and they are freelance or they own their own business and they work from home and or they are a work-at-home mom, to really build a relationship with a lender, right? Because then you can say, you're only making $40,000 a year. You need to be making $80,000 a year. Let's work
Right.
together for the next 3 years. Right? So what would you
Yep.
like? What would you say? I don't know what the question is really, but I think that that's an important thing to note, because
It is.
you need to have the money to be able to figure
Yeah.
this out.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier where, people maybe think they know how mortgages work and,
Yeah.
they remember from their previous loan. Mortgage programs change literally every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's my job to keep up with it. So I know all of the
Yeah.
programs. I mean, there are thousands of programs out there. So if we're talking about somebody that has, a different type of income, you're not an hourly or salaried person, there's so many loan programs out there now that we could likely find one for you. But like you said too, maybe we're not quite there. I know I'm going to need a mortgage of X and maybe we're not quite
Yeah.
there. I can tell you what you will need to make
Right.
in order to get there.
Right.
So again, working with us early on to know that upfront is super important. Yeah, but don't listen to other people. You'll hear other people say,
Yeah.
you can't do that," or
No, right.
whatever. Talk to
Yeah.
a reputable lender because
Yes.
they'll be able to help you.
Which brings me to my last question for today, but we're going to have you back, Renee, because there's so many things to talk about with this. But we don't want to overload people. I say this all the time, but no two divorces are the same, right? And no two
Mhm.
contracts are the same. So, I think it's important if you could just kind of talk for a second about the fact that there's so many options when it comes to mortgages and to buying out the house or selling the house or whatever. I'm sure you've seen a little bit of everything.
I have. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of divorce agreements, and no two have been alike.
Yeah.
So there are all kinds of options, and the people that I really want to connect with are the ones that think or have been told, particularly by a spouse, you'll never be able to keep the house. You'll never be able to get a
Yeah.
mortgage. Those are the people I want to talk to, because there are options. There are so many programs, and we'll find one that works for you. And you can use alimony and child support as income. You can use, if you're self-employed, there's
Yeah.
tons of programs out there. So, don't settle. Talk to us early. And, I can even offer some suggestions. I'm not an attorney, but I have seen many, many, many divorce agreements.
Yeah.
And so there are some other options that we can look at. People think that I have to make a decision right now about the house, and that doesn't necessarily
No.
mean that you have to. I've seen divorce agreements that will say, we're going to keep everything status quo for the next 2 years until,
Yeah.
the kids are out of school, or
Yeah.
there's all different kinds of circumstances. So they're all different.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, at least in my states where I do most of my divorce work, in Massachusetts, but judges don't like to see like an indefinite.
Right.
Right now, the elephant in the room, the interest rates, right? Nobody wants to make any decisions right now. And most judges, most courts will not allow you to say, well, when the rates get better, we'll refi.
Right.
They want a definitive answer. When? Time frame. Is that 1 year, 2 year, 5 years? Like, they need a decision made in that sense. But that decision doesn't have to be, we're selling the house, or,
No.
I'm buying you out in 60 days. So again, all kinds of options, all
Yeah.
kinds of variations. And I can help you. If I know that we need 6 more months of your income before we can use it,
Yeah.
great. Then we put 9 months in your agreement that, talk to your attorney. We need 9 months to make sure that the income is there to qualify for the mortgage.
Yeah, I know in my divorce agreement, I had like a year to figure out what I wanted to do. And then I bought my house and it was great. And then I got to sell it and get the equity later on. So,
Right.
it was a win for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So where do you work, Renee, and how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I work for Cross Country Mortgage. We're a national lender. You can reach me best way is through my website, www.teamreneecoleman.com. All my information is on there: emails, phone numbers, websites, links, LinkedIn, Insta, all of them.
Wonderful. And obviously, all of your information will be in the show notes. And you can also find Renee at Fresh Start Registry in the Expert Guide. Renee, we're going to definitely have you come back because I want to get questions from people, because I get this question. And I think the most important thing, and then before we let you go, I have one more question for you, but is that we never want anybody to feel trapped, right?
Mhm.
And I think like having somebody like you on their side to say like there are always options is so important.
Super important.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we let you go, one more question,
Yeah.
because you work with a lot of divorced people. For anybody listening to this who's going through a divorce right now, what would be some words of encouragement that you could leave them with?
So there's options, right? And know early. Talk to your team early, right? People often think the real estate side comes last, and they've got to talk to their attorneys first. Talk to your lender early. The more you know the numbers, the easier it's going to be to get through the process. And I encourage you not to listen to anybody else. Listen to your lender, the professional that works in the industry and will have the whole picture. So
Yeah. Especially don't listen to the person that you're currently trying to get divorced from.
exactly.
Let's just put that one out there. 'Cause they
Exactly.
can say
100%.
they say whatever they want, and it is
And they
not.
do.
They do, believe me, they do. And
Yeah.
that's honestly my biggest piece of advice I give to anyone going through divorces. Don't listen to the person you're getting divorced from. They can tell you whatever they want, and until that lawyer signs that document, nothing is set in stone. So,
Exactly.
yeah, well,
100%.
Renee, we appreciate you and the work you do, and it's like, it's so important, the work you do, and I just want everybody to understand how important it is to build that free life that everybody wants to have after
Yep.
divorce. Well, thank you so much for being here, Renee.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Divorce Happens is produced by Fresh Starts Registry, the only divorce registry platform for everything you need to begin again, including home items, hype team, and everything in between. Remember, divorce happens, and then we start fresh. We're here to support you before, during, and after divorce. Head to freshstartsregistry.com for more info.